Good evening, Florida, and happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day, and welcome to Coastal Conservative News, where truth has a backbone and freedom still has a home. I'm Michelle Posey.
And I'm Allie Leger. We're bringing you the bold stories, the real headlines, and the voices that matter most right here from the heart of the free state of Florida.
From Tallahassee to the Sun Coast, we're tracking the political shifts, community victories, and constitutional battles shaping the future of our state and our nation.
So buckle up. It's time to get informed, get fired up, and get involved. This is CCN, Coastal Conservative News.
That's right. Let's kick things off with Katie and your week in review.
Thank you, Allie and Michelle. I'm Katie with CCN's Week in Review. Let's get into it. Sarasota's Philippi Creek is a growing concern this hurricane season. A neglected and clogged waterway threatening to flood entire neighborhoods. Once more, plans to dredge the sediment-choked channel have now been pushed back. Why? Because Sarasota County's staff fumbled an emergency permit request, submitting incomplete paperwork at the last minute. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers rejected the fast-tracked request, reclassifying it as standard. That decision delays the project well past hurricane season. Despite forecasters predicting up to 19 named storms through November, years of neglect have turned Philippi Creek into a hazard. And now, with the dredging plan stalled, our community is left exposed. Streets could become rivers. Homes could once again see water pouring in. The county has approved a $60 million plan to restore the creek's capacity, but without swift action on permitting and construction, Sarasota remains at risk for yet another devastating flood season. Breaking news, and it's explosive. United States Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is blowing the whistle on the CDC. He is accusing them of deliberately covering up a bombshell internal study. That study allegedly found a 1,135% increase in autism linked to the Hepatitis B vaccine. You heard that right. Over 1,000% higher risk. And the CDC's response? Bury it. Hide it from the public. Let countless children and families pay the price. For years, anyone who dared to question the vaccine was mocked, censored, and labeled a conspiracy theorist. But tonight, RFK Jr. says those so-called conspiracy theorists were right all along. This isn't just negligence, it's betrayal. Kennedy is demanding accountability, calling this one of the most shameful scandals in American history. We deserve the truth. Parents deserve informed consent, and the CDC deserves to answer for what it's done. We'll keep following this story developing. We'll keep following this story. Stay with us as the truth comes to light. Florida is making history as the first state in the nation to require EKG screenings for student athletes. Under the new rule, all middle school and high school athletes will need an electrocardiogram before they can compete. Supporters say it's a life-saving move that could catch hidden heart conditions early, helping to prevent sudden cardiac deaths on the field. Florida officials point to alarming data showing that some of these conditions go undetected in standard physical exams. By mandating EKGs, the state hopes to protect thousands of young athletes and give parents greater peace of mind. Some also argue this will be an important safeguard given growing concerns about heart problems in young people, including worries about rare vaccine-related side effects. While there are questions about costs and logistics, health experts say the potential to save even one life makes the change worth it. Florida's new requirement takes effect this school year, setting a new standard for the student-athlete safety nationwide. Governor Ron DeSantis is earning praise after signing one of Florida's largest tax cut packages in history, delivering $2 billion in relief to families and businesses statewide. The plan permanently eliminates Florida's unique business rent tax, making it easier for businesses to grow and hire. It also expands popular sales tax holiday year-round for back-to-school supplies, hurricane preparedness items, ammunition, sporting goods, putting real savings back into the Floridians' pockets. Supporters say this bold move proves Florida is serious about lowering the cost of living, attracting new jobs, and protecting taxpayers. DeSantis calls it a commitment to growth, freedom, and fiscal responsibility, solidifying Florida's reputation as one of the most economically competitive states in the country. Congratulations, Governor. That's it for this week in review. I'll see you next week on CCN.
Welcome back to CCN. Thank you, Katie, for that report. Now, here is Raj Dorswamy with our Suncoast Community segment.
Welcome, my friends. I am delighted to bring a conversation that you've heard me refer to earlier, and that is the crisis with energy. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait, we have another crisis. We got election issues, we got healthcare issues, we got health freedom issues, and now we're talking about energy. Can't our government get anything right? If you're asking yourself, because that's what I ask myself. Well, my friends, I am very happy to be bringing this guest to you. I'm not happy about what he has to say, but I'm happy that you will be very informed as the result of this conversation. And I'm here today with David Walsh. David, how are you today?
How are you, Raj? Very good. Thanks for having me today.
You are so welcome. You have been highly recommended by so many people that have heard your presentation. I wish we had the same amount of time in this interview that you've had in yours, because it really takes a lot to unpack that. But for those folks who don't know, David Walsh will be speaking at the Reclaim Campaign statewide conference on July 26th. So make sure you catch him there to get more about this topic. David, energy affects everybody. It doesn't care what party you're on, Democratic or Republican. Doesn't care what ethnicity, or doesn't care what your income level, which part of town you live in. Energy, meaning electricity, affects everyone. So could you let the folks know what is happening, especially those people who are hearing about a crisis in this particular area for the first time, David?
Well, the energy issue before us here in Florida is, and a lot of the nation, the big one now is electricity, the cost and the scarcity of electricity. And those two things tie very tightly together. Scarcity creates higher cost. And indeed, nationally and especially locally in the state, we're running into a massive scarcity of generated electricity with the binge for the last 6 years that our public utilities in Florida have been installing only solar and battery storage, mainly solar, a little bit of battery storage, and frankly, nothing else.
So let me just make sure I catch that. For the last few years, this is not something that happened in 2025. Our electric companies have been leaning into solar energy. Okay. And what's wrong with that? And also, what else could they have done or should they have done, Dave?
Well, what is the matter? It's since about 2020, all three, the regulated utilities here, TECO, Duke, the biggest one, FP&L, they have been on a campaign of no diversity in their electricity supply sources, have gotten very focused on solar, really solar only. The trouble with that, solar's great. It's advertised by them to be free energy. And I'm not talking about rooftop. I'm talking about the utility scale solar farms that they prefer to build for 74, 75 megawatt solar farms that are 688 acres each, that wind up being about 5 to 6 times the cost of conventionally supplied gas-fired electricity or nuclear power or coal-fired electricity. This stuff is actually very, very, very expensive. So when everyone looks at their bill in the last 5 years, what's happened, for example, ours here in the Duke service territory up by Orlando, north of Orlando, since 2016 is now up 42%. The price of natural gas, they're 88% naturally gas dependent still. You'd think with gas prices being very low, natural gas the last 10 years, electricity shouldn't have gone up very much. Well, the problem is Duke, for one, has spent nearly $3 billion on a tiny quantity in megawatt capacity of about 360 megawatts of solar farms, being about 22 solar farms that they've got built and under construction and have loaded $3 billion into the rates now for a very, very trivial quantity of electricity. For example, in that case, the $3 billion provides a net capacity when you take out night and you take out cloud cover of 23% of the time. This provides effective power. You get a very, very high cost per kilowatt generated. So the same amount of power would have taken only about 360 megawatts of gas-fired power, which would have cost about, in cost in the last 6 years, about $350 million to build. The same quantity of electrification that they have spent $3 billion on because it's sunshine, intermittent part-time sunshine. The land is expensive. The solar panels are extremely expensive. The erection of those, when you put all that together, you've got cost that's about 5 to 6 times more than conventionally generated power. And they'll never tell you that, but that's a fact. And that's why the rates have gone up so high. And that's why you've got, for example, right now, Florida Power and Light has before the ratepayers of Florida, the counties that they control and have a monopoly in, a record high rate case in the United States of America ever for a public utility requesting its clients to pony up $9 billion in added rates over the next 4 years, which will scale up their rates about 40% to pay for nothing but more and more and more utility scale solar farms that only operate 23% of the time effectively, and about 5.2 hours a day at max, and don't supply anything before 9:30 in the morning, and don't supply much of anything after 4:30 in the afternoon. So you're talking about a quantity of power that's very focused, no matter how much of it they build this way, in the time window between 9:30 and 4:30 only, with which we're already saturated because of the first 5 years of this. Our utilities have already built about 10,000 megawatts of solar across Florida. Well, they've built nothing else. So they've only addressed capacity needs between 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. They haven't addressed capacity needs in the summer peak time period, which is 4 to 7:30 in the evening when it remains hot, AC remains on, people getting home from work, put the washer, the dryer on, etc. And then you look over on the other side in winter mornings. Another window occurs at 5 a.m. to about 9 a.m. where peak demand and de minimis supply of electricity now occurs because solar power doesn't work at that time of day either. See, power generation isn't stored up or saved up in the wires or in substations. It has got to be used literally the nanosecond that it's made, electric generation. So you don't have the reservoir effect of a water reservoir or a gas tank where you've got power in reserve. Electricity is used the millisecond it's created. So the fact of having no power created before 9 a.m. and after 4:30 p.m. creates a huge, huge problem of shortage in those time periods. But then the cost issue of this being 5 to 6 times more costly than conventional power, everyone's seeing this now in their bills. So it has become a massive crisis across the state. The shortage delivered thusly, and the fact of the rates going up so much to pay for it.
Remarkable. And it's quite sad, to be honest with you, that we're dealing with this in the great state of Florida. And first, this is the first time I've ever heard that such a problem is taking place. And I want to just mention a couple of highlights from what you talked about. One, what I think you're saying is focus has been extremely high on solar. And while solar is promoted as something green, environmental friendly, the cost for that energy to the consumer is massively high for the various reasons that you just mentioned. Also, what you're also sharing with us is that there's also a huge rate increase coming, and it's there. I guess there are conversations right now between the utility companies and Congress, or it's legislation here in Florida about that. Why does that happen? Why do the utilities companies have to talk to legislation? I thought they just send a rate increase and everyone gets an increase. How does that part work?
Well, the break point that government has in most states is the Public Service Commission or Public Utilities Commission. We have a Public Service Commission. It's appointed by the governor. The governor has huge say blessing in how they rule on things and what the strategy is for how they work. But basically, the Public Service Commission here, appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate, has gone along with every single rate increase for solar power and renewables that these firms present. And if you look at the why of that, they happen to be very, very large political donors. Probably right after the insurance companies, the public utilities, Duke, TECO, and Florida Power and Light are huge, huge political donors. So they wind up in a position of terrific control over the candidates who wind up being elected to public office in the state house, the state senate, and the governor. And they basically get their way. But, we've got some ideas that I proposed and others are pushing now to look at eliminating the ability of these firms who are regulated by the state, but at the same time granted state monopoly territories to void out their ability to contribute to political campaigns, because it just creates an intractable conflict that they now bring this kind of cost level to the table. And they've got, basically, they own our political class and our government class through donations they've made. So, but no, states mainly control electric power, the generation sources used, the cost of it, the basic thing of power plants or solar farms, wind, is controlled in this country at the state level, mainly at the state level. And that's done usually through a public service commission reporting into a governor.
So with all of that said, is there an action that we can ask the viewers to take? Like, how do they get their voices heard? How do they engage in this conversation in a meaningful way, Dave?
Well, this present rate case is a tyranny of the urgent thing. It needs immediate action for as many listeners who have the desire to do so, to get a hold of the State Public Service Commission. Raj, I think we have the docket number. There's the email address. There's the docket number. Docket 202-500-11 is the docket. And then the email address is the clerk@psc.state.fl.us to plead that this $9 billion rate increase by FP&L, the biggest ever in the history of the country, that will send rates in this state upward by another 40% in the counties that they control and are the monopoly supplier in, is unjustifiable.
But if you go to @Dave Walsh Energy, he's got a bunch of small videos that you can listen to, that you can share with your officials. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not some fringe idea. This is in play right now, and it's going to show up in your electric bill in your mailbox very soon. So we need your voice to be heard. Thank you, Dave. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj, for that report. And next up is our Political Pulse segment right here on CCN.
Welcome back to Coastal Conservative News. I'm Allie Leger, and this is Political Pulse, where Florida's firebrand spirit meets the headlines that matter.
That's right, Allie. And I'm Michelle Posey. From razor wire surrounded detention centers to record-breaking civic engagement, our state here in Florida is once again defying expectations and writing its own rules.
And we begin tonight with a story that's part serious security move and part Florida folklore in the making. Buckle up, it's Alligator Alcatraz.
It's real, guys. It's Florida, and it's officially open, Allie. Alligator Alcatraz, the state's newest criminal illegal alien holding center, is now fully operational.
Footage released this week shows a perimeter surrounded by water, wildlife, including pythons, and yes, actual alligators, and a message from Attorney General James Uthmeyer, who says, quote, "We will not allow Florida communities to be threatened by criminal aliens," end quote.
Yeah, this isn't a joke. In fact, inside the facility, detainees are being held under strict supervision. Reports confirm it's secure, constitutional, and already making an impact.
And because this is Florida, naturally, Joe Exotic had to weigh in.
Oh
yes,
gosh.
the Tiger King himself. But look at what he says here.
In a bizarre social media post, he called it, and I'm quoting, "a wild and inhumane swamp circus." But sorry, Joe, this isn't a Netflix special, and really it wasn't even that good. This is real leadership in action.
I kind of like it, though. Predator Penitentiary, it kind of has a ring to it. But from dangerous predators to political ones, Florida isn't afraid to put barriers between them and our citizens.
And speaking of citizen action, Allie, let's pivot to a major victory for civic engagement. Voter registration in Florida has hit an all-time high, and my bet is they are actually documented voters.
Yes.
With voter ID. That's a good thing.
According to the latest numbers, more Floridians are registering to vote than ever before, but the surge in Republican and unaffiliated voter registration leading the way.
It's interesting. I think our party should pay attention to why people would want to be unaffiliated, right? Let's go after them. Absolutely. This isn't just a stat, guys. It's a signal. Floridians are awake, aware, and ready to defend their freedoms at the ballot box.
Absolutely. And with local elections and national battles ahead, this momentum could tip the scales in districts all across the state.
That's right.
Freedom is a theme running through every corner of Florida lately, and this week, Governor DeSantis underscored it by unveiling a statue of Thomas Jefferson in none other than Jefferson County.
Get ready to cue those liberal tears. That's right. We're calling Jefferson a visionary of liberty. DeSantis emphasized Florida's commitment to founding values, not revisionist history. Take a look at this.
There he is, right there.
In a time when statues are being torn down elsewhere, Florida's building them up, and that says everything.
While we're on the topic of building, Allie, the DeSantis administration just announced a fiscal milestone that would make even Thomas Jefferson proud.
That's right. Since Florida's statehood, taxpayers have carried debt. But under DeSantis' leadership, half of Florida's tax-supported debt has now been paid off.
That.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. Not only is the state running a surplus, but we're doing it while cutting taxes, expanding parental rights, and defending constitutional freedom.
Other states should take notes. Florida's not just fighting back, we're planning ahead.
Ooh, I love that. Absolutely.
Up next, we have a very special guest. Stay with us.
Stay tuned.
As we continue our look into Florida's political heartbeat, we're turning our focus to the issues of education where policies, power plays, and parental rights are colliding.
That's right. And joining us now is Thomas Kenny. He's really a seasoned investigator, independent journalist, and author of the explosive Substack series, Tales from the State Board of Education, which really exposes what's really going on inside Florida's education bureaucracy. He's also the editor-in-chief of that Substack, the Sunshine Journal. We're so glad that you joined us, Thomas. Thanks for coming on to CCN today.
Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're
great.
good.
Awesome.
Now we've been following your work, and you've been uncovering some serious red flags in local and state education leadership.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know where you would like to start exactly, other than to say that one of the things I do is work with Moms for Liberty over here, the Indian River chapter. It's the original chapter of Moms for Liberty.
That's awesome.
I ran for school board in 2022. They endorsed me. And so I do policy and media. And one of the things I decided to do as someone who has a background in it was start the Sunshine Journal. And I basically just cover the local issues, school board, county commission, city, Vero Beach, council, that type of stuff, and what goes on behind the scenes. So you uncover a lot, because a lot of times when you have a slanted one-way media in your local town, you know, you can go in there as a conservative and just find stories, and they write themselves. You don't have to think too hard about it. You just have to put it on paper, or in this case, the electronic world.
I love it. That
You're
actually
right.
works, yeah.
There has been such a void in independent journalism and media. You're right. It's very difficult to get a story that might be more conservative leaning or even just fair and balanced. So I love your Substack. How did you get started in this, Thomas? I mean, I know you said you ran for school board. What prompted you to do that?
Well, during when I ran, there was this guy named Ryan Blade, and he started Indian River News to try and do it. He wasn't much of a journalist, but he had a big heart, and he really did some good things, and it started to pick up steam almost immediately. I mean, it's like there's a desperation for balanced coverage, especially on local issues. And I had a media background, but I'm running an election, so I didn't have time for it. But he did pretty good. And then he stopped. He got out. He went back to school. He's a young college kid. And I had people approach me and say, you know, you need to do something like this. And so I was like, well, it's a lot of work, but I'll give it a whirl. And I started in December of 23. And one of the first things I uncovered was that our county government here, Indian River County, they have I talked to you guys a little bit about this when I met you the other day. We have what we call the Children's Services Advisory Committee, and a lot of NGOs can come in and get county dollars. And they had given $425,000 to an NGO, the Learning Alliance, that had an income of 19.8 million. And it's like, why do you give them $425,000? They got 19.8 million bucks in the bank
Unbelievable.
on gross revenues of 23 million that year.
My goodness.
That was my first story. And like I said, the news writes itself.
Yeah. My goodness.
That's so true. And this is just, again, this isn't, we love talking about Doge on the federal level, right? But this is right in your own backyard. You were doing Doge before Doge existed, really.
Before Doge was cool, yeah. And the Sunshine Journal is basically, I have Ben Franklin here, and then I have Frederick Douglass, who you see behind me, on my logo, because they're probably the two most important journalists in the American history, in my view. One for establishing the press, and the other to taking it to during the Civil War era. And what he did with language is amazing. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, can we just jump into your latest expose of the Vice Mayor, Linda Moore, allegedly hosting events with an organization linked to transgender transitions for minors? What exactly did you uncover, and how are Florida parents responding to it?
Well, I don't know if it's linked to any particular organization, but she's been, LGBTQ. She has an establishment called the Kilted Mermaid here in town, and she hosts drag queen bingo every Sunday. And for a while there, she was allowing kids in there. Then in 2023, that law came down, where they expanded about kids not going to drag shows, which that's Supreme Court precedent, and Miller and Ginsburg versus New York and all those others. That law was challenged immediately. So at the end of the month here, she had a drag show, or Pride Day. She did a Pride Tea Party. And they did 2 drag performances, and one was a guy, and there are all these kids there. It was all ages. She advertised all ages. The club advertises all ages. It's a restaurant and bar. It's right in the center of town. And
how are the parents in your county, Indian River? Yeah. How are they responding to this and the news?
This has become my most read story since I started the Sunshine Journal.
Wow.
Okay. We've had some pretty wild stuff here happen but this is, I guess, in terms of going viral locally, this is the one that's been it. I think people are outraged because you've got pictures of a drag queen walking up to a 10-year-old and, acting.
Are they hungry for action?
And then going out and doing a strip club, going out and doing a strip routine, basically, in underwear, and collecting dollars from people all over the club.
Oh,
with minors
that's terrible.
So what is being done that you know of? Is anything being done? Because this is a direct violation of Florida law.
Right.
Is there any way to hold somebody like that vice mayor accountable?
Well, the thing is that law got challenged. I did a follow-up. I offered a correction because in my story, I said that's, $5,000 fine and possible losing of the liquor license. And the Florida Department of Hotels and Restaurants takes care of all that. But they are in a court battle because that law got challenged by the Hamburger Marys in Orlando. And they did it at the federal level. Now, normally the federal level, when something like this happens, that's a state law.
Right.
They'll defer it to the Supreme Court of that state, but they didn't do that here.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So the court ruled on it, put a stay on the law, and then they took it to the appellate who held the stay, and then the appellate struck down the law.
Excuse me?
Yeah. So that's where it stands right now. It could go to the Supreme Court.
What needs to happen in order for it to get to the Supreme Court? And this is because I know our viewers are probably asking the same question.
Yeah, I would assume that the court has to take it, and therefore the Melanie Griffin, who's the secretary of the Florida Department of Hotels and Restaurants, or Restaurants and Hotels, I can't always remember, probably Hotels and Restaurants, has to file, and they have to accept it. Now, she tried to get that stay removed during this process and took it to the Supreme Court, and they said, in a 6-3 vote, said no. But now this is a case because the appellate has dismissed the law in a split decision.
That
And
is very interesting.
you want to know what's really funny is that they held up the stay, which was across the state. Universal, remember the Universal?
Yes.
Trump. So Trump got that removed. So here we have a court ruling that would say though she should have it on the merits. So they hold up the stay. The Supreme Court gets rid of universal injunctions. We have a state universal injunction on this law. I have a feeling that's being removed, which now maybe, I'm not sure, could play in what's going on right here. But I do know that the Attorney General is investigating. I don't know anything about the investigation, but I know he's taking charge of it, according
Very
to
good.
Awesome. We'll stay on top of that with Attorney General Uthmeier.
Yeah, and keep us informed as you learn more information about it so we can keep our viewers informed as well.
Absolutely.
Goodness gracious.
Absolutely. And so you've talked, and you alluded to it earlier in this interview, about how important language is. I know if you read your Substack, viewers read your Substack, you go into this about why language matters, not only in education matters, but also one of the things that we met this past week at a training seminar, one of the things that astonished me is that really a lot of people do not reach out to our Florida Board of Education when they have issue on the local level. You guys are doing this really greatly in Indian River. Can you let us know a little bit about that and also how important language is?
Yeah, and I would take it back to the library book battle. Because Jennifer Pippin, our local Moms for Liberty chapter chair, the only one we've ever had, she doesn't stop with the local level. A lot of people stop. And so one of the things that she did was she got herself on the committee to do the certification for the media specialists in all of our libraries. And she brought the language of what is now the training.
Wow.
And, there were 3 people that were on her side out of 12, 9 of them against. But 2 people are going, if you guys do this, you're violating obscenity laws, you're violating this, you're violating that.
Correct.
And they were explaining the law very clearly. So they'd done the research and expressed it in such a manner. It's like, you guys can't. And they got 12 people to vote for the way they wanted it written.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That is
And so
amazing.
it's very important that you understand what you're talking about. Like I said, the news, a lot of it I get writes itself because you see people you even see elected officials, they get into these positions, school board, hey, moms run for school board, but they don't always have this grounding, or they don't, you get a lot of teachers who've been around administrative bureaucracy all their lives. And they go in going, I'll do administrative bureaucracy better than the next person. But they have no sense of how to do electoral governing.
Right.
They don't understand those principles of constitutional norms, and things like that.
Or proper roles and responsibilities of the seat in which they sit in, that they have the privilege of sitting in because of the elected that put them there, the electors that put them there.
Exactly.
It's quite interesting that you have to educate people on what the proper roles and responsibilities are of a school board member. They're not instructional, right? They do not teach children. They're there as essentially a board, like in a CEO capacity. You're sitting there creating policy, making sure that it reflects the law. Yes. That is your job as a school board member, is to make sure that your policies line up to the law. And if they don't, you have to change the policy. And if that doesn't work, then you go up the chain to the State Department of Education. That is how that's supposed to work. And you also have to make sure that you're using your political power and pressure of the platform that you've been given to wield that political power with your constituents so that they also know that they can be behind you and support you. So
that's one of the things.
Very true. It's so true. And we have 1-2 people on the school board from a conservative standpoint that really, they understand the idea of policy. And, you met Jackie Rosario. She's a 30-year educator,
firebrand,
master's degrees and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But she said, it took me a year to figure out that throwing out educational ideas isn't everything. It's the policy, and then it's the constitutionality of that policy, as you said, aligns to state law. Because if it's not administratively correct, it's useless policy in the end.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And
language matters.
Language,
that.
It does matter.
Absolutely matters. And when you argue from those paradigms of what is proper policy and what is what is proper governance, that tends to baffle a lot of people and causes them to rethink what they're doing.
Absolutely.
You're right.
You can't fight principle with ideas. You have to fight principle with principle.
And one of the great things that
Exactly.
you guys do there in Indian River, because you do have an actively engaged electorate that they understand probably a lot through Moms for Liberty, but other organizations, they're really actively involved. Can you direct, as we close here today, can you direct our viewers on where they can find out more about you and your Substack, and any words of wisdom you have to those here throughout Florida that want to get more involved on the local level?
If you want to get involved, it's a marathon, not always a sprint. You do have some great sprints. In 23, we had, it took us 2 years to get books out of these pornographic books out of the libraries. And it happened with a viral thing that went viral. 20 million people saw it here in Indian River. And, but it was a long time coming for that to happen. And it was just staying in every day and doing the work. And so, we all show up for school board meetings, even if we have nothing to say.
Yeah.
'Cause just your presence will change it'll change people's tact. And so you can reach me. I'm on Substack. If you go on substack.com, just search The Sunshine Journal. That's The Sunshine Journal at Substack. And I pretty much do 2-3 articles a week. It's all local, but it has that statewide understanding, because especially with the school board issues and things like that, I'll say right now, like in Hillsborough, near where you guys are, they're still fighting about books. They're still trying to get genderqueer, which has graphic
Incredible.
pornography.
It's incredible they're still fighting this. It's been 4 years.
Yeah, but we, because of what we've done and advocated and presented evidence and continue to present evidence, we've gotten out of that, and our school district is moving into top 10. It's truly been a collaboration of the advocacy of conservative parents showing up every day, and then the people at the school board, even though they may be center left or whatever, getting an understanding. We have people who join the disciplinary committees that parents can join. We have them on curriculum reviews. And so they come with this knowledge, and we develop language to make it happen. And that's the beauty of it.
You're doing everything right. As General Flynn says, local action does make a national impact. We're starting right in our own backyard. And obviously, Thomas Kenny, you are, as Allie says, the tip of the spear in your area doing that. I thank you so much for joining us. We will have you back because we want to follow up on this vice mayor that y'all have there in that case. But we'll definitely bring you back on. Thank you so much for joining us on CCN. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, and happy 4th, everyone.
Thank you so much.
And now we'll go to Kevin with this week's Faith in Focus.
Hello and welcome to Faith in Focus. Today we're tackling a profound topic, why the resurrection of Jesus is the cornerstone of Christianity and how pre-Pauline creeds are considered contemporary history and the compelling evidence for Jesus' existence and the empty tomb. We'll also discuss the surprising role of women whose words were dismissed in their time, discovering the empty tomb. Let's dive in. First, let's address why the resurrection is the cornerstone of Christianity. The Apostle Paul puts it bluntly in 1 Corinthians 15:14. If Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless and so is your faith. The resurrection isn't just a miraculous event, it's the foundation of Christian hope. It validates Jesus' claim to be the Son of God, defeats death, and promises eternal life for believers. Without it, Christianity loses its transformative power. The New Testament hinges on this event with over 200 references to Jesus' rising from the dead. It's not a peripheral detail, it's the heartbeat of the gospel faith. But how do we know this even happened? Let's start with the historical evidence for Jesus' existence. Some skeptics claim Jesus was a myth, but the evidence says otherwise. Christian sources like the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, detail his life, teachings, and crucifixion. These were written within 30 to 60 years of Jesus' death, around 30 to 33 AD, well within the lifetime of eyewitnesses. But we don't rely only on Christian texts. Non-Christian sources corroborate Jesus' existence. Roman historian Tacitus mentions Jesus' execution under Pontius Pilate in Annals, circa 116 AD 116. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus refers to Jesus and his followers in the Antiquities of the Jews, circa AD 93. Even the Jewish Talmud acknowledges a figure named Yeshu executed for sorcery, aligning with Christian claims about Jesus' miracles. These sources, hostile or neutral, confirm Jesus was a real person who lived, taught, and died in the first century Judea. Denying his existence is fringe scholarship, akin to denying Socrates existed. Even agnostic historians will tell us that Jesus did exist. Now let's talk about the empty tomb, a pivotal piece in the resurrection narrative. First off, if it ended at the cross, we wouldn't even know who Jesus was. All four Gospels report that Jesus was crucified, buried in a tomb provided by Joseph of Arimathea, and that tomb was found empty on the third day. This is significant because the empty tomb isn't just a Christian claim, it's a historical puzzle that demands explanation. Here's the evidence. First, the burial story is credible. Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council that condemned Jesus. It's unlikely Christians would invent a sympathetic Sanhedrin figure unless it was true, given the hostility between early Christians and Jewish authorities. Second, the tomb's location was known. Jesus was buried in Jerusalem, where his enemies could have easily checked the tomb. If it wasn't empty, the authorities could have produced the body to squash Christian claims, but they didn't. But the most compelling detail? The tomb was discovered empty by women. In first century Judea, a woman's testimony was not admissible in court and was often dismissed as unreliable. All four Gospels, Mark 16, Matthew 28, Luke 24, and John 20, name women like Mary Magdalene as the first witnesses. If the story were fabricated, why choose women as witnesses in a culture that wouldn't value their word? This criterion of embarrassment suggests the account is authentic. Early Christians wouldn't have invented a detail that made their story less credible to their audience. So how do we know these details weren't just later legends? This brings us to the pre-Pauline creeds, which are considered contemporary history. These are early statements of belief predating Paul's letters that summarize core Christian teachings. The most famous is found in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-5, written around 50 to 55 AD, just 20 years after Jesus' death. It says, Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, was buried, and raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Scholars agree this creed originates within 2 to 5 years of Jesus' crucifixion, likely from the Jerusalem church. Why? Paul says he received this tradition, a term for passing on oral history. He likely got it from Peter and James during his visit to Jerusalem around 35 AD. This is remarkably early contemporary history by ancient standards. Compare it to the biographies of Alexander the Great written centuries after his death. The creed's early date means the resurrection claim wasn't a later myth, but a belief held by Jesus' first followers. The creed also lists appearances to multiple witnesses. Peter, the 12, 500 people, James, and Paul. These weren't private visions, but public claims open to scrutiny. Critics could have interviewed these witnesses, many of whom were alive when Paul wrote. The rapid spread of Christianity in a hostile environment further suggests something extraordinary, like an empty tomb and resurrection appearances, which ignited the movement. Let's tie this together. The resurrection is Christianity's cornerstone because it proves Jesus' divine authority and promises life beyond death. The empty tomb, corroborated by early sources, and the unlikely testimony of women demands a historical explanation. Jesus' existence is confirmed by Christian and non-Christian texts alike, and the pre-Pauline creeds dating to within years of the crucifixion show the resurrection was proclaimed from the start, not a later invention. Thanks for joining me on Faith in Focus. If this episode sparked your curiosity, share it with a friend or dive deeper into the sources we mentioned. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Kevin, for keeping our faith front and center as always. From razor-backed prisons to bronze tributes to liberty, This week shows that Florida isn't just surviving the chaos, it's thriving through clarity and courage.
We're building stronger communities, empowering more voters, and refusing to bow to fear or failure.
Yeah, Allie, this is what happens when leaders lead and citizens engage. It's Florida's formula, and it's working. We're waiting for the rest of the country to pick it up.
Absolutely. For Coastal Conservative News, I'm Allie Leger.
And I'm Michelle Posey.
We'll see you next week at 7 p.m.
God bless you, and God bless the great state of Florida. Have a happy 4th of July.